Hermione's Song, Chapter 5 Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Tonks just stood in the doorway of the carriage as the doctor confronted Professor Snape, shocked at what she was seeing. She was too far away to hear what was said, but Snape's reaction and facial expressions when he stormed off told her all she needed to know. Watching the doctor take care of a couple of Death Eaters had been impressive. Seeing him make Snape back down and look like he had a wand shoved somewhere it shouldn't go was simply amazing. She looked off to her right and saw Hermione looking at the doctor with a grin on her face. Tonks glanced back at the doctor, and a grin of her own crept up on her. Even though Hermione had never told anyone, Tonks knew that her friend had a thing for Ron Weasley. She thought Ron was a nice enough bloke, but Tonks knew in her heart that her distant cousin was far too flaky for the young witch.
This doctor fellow might be just what Hermione needs to show her what a real man is like. He can't be more than 10 years older than her. My parents are happily married, and they're 12 years apart,
she told herself. She hopped out of the carriage and made a beeline to Hermione. Hermione saw Tonks get out of the carriage and head in her direction. She waved at the now purple-haired Auror.
Tonks!
She exclaimed loudly as she hugged her friend.
What brings you to Hogwarts?
She asked.
I thought you were assigned to Diagon Alley,
she said.
Hello yourself, Hermione. I still am,
Tonks replied.
Minister Scrimgeour pulled me off for a bit so I could escort the doctor to Hogwarts,
she said, indicating the newcomer with a jerk of her head. Hermione looked over at the doctor, who was on his hands and knees studying a flower next to the outer wall of the castle. He broke off a leaf, popped it in his mouth, and then spit it out, an odd look on his face.
Who is he, and why would Scrimgeour need you to escort him?
She asked. Tonks shook her head at the doctor's antics before looking back at Hermione.
He calls himself the Doctor, and pretty much everything else about him is a mystery,
she explained.
As for me being assigned to escort duty,
she said, pausing to lean over and whisper in Hermione's ear.
Definitely not a hardship posting, considering how cute he is, she told her.
Hermione blushed because she had been thinking pretty much along the same lines. She playfully hit Tonks' arm.
Tonks, you're spoken for,
she reminded her friend. Tonks made an exaggeratedly disappointed face. Literally. Her face drooped an extra 2 inches beyond what a normal face could do.
I suppose I am, aren't I?
She asked and made her face look normal again. She again leaned in to whisper to Hermione.
Lucky for you, you're not, she said suggestively.
Tonks!
Hermione said, embarrassed, her eyes going wide. She got herself back under control and tried to glare at her friend, but her heart just wasn't in it.
You're a bad influence on the students here, you know that, right?
She asked.
Wouldn't have it any other way,
Tonks said smugly. She put her arm through Hermione's.
Come on, I'll introduce you to the handsome doctor, she said, pulling Hermione along with her. The doctor looked up from his sampling of the local flora to see Tonks pulling along a pretty young woman dressed as one of the students. The first thing he noticed about her was the intelligence flashing behind her beautiful brown eyes. The afternoon sun was glinting off her light brown, frizzy hair. Her dark eyebrows contrasted well with her pale skin. He smoothed out his tweed jacket under his robe and straightened his bow tie. Doctor, there's someone I would like you to meet,
Tonks said when she got close to the doctor.
Doctor, this is my friend Hermione Granger. She's a 6th-year student here at Hogwarts, Tonks informed him.
The doctor stuck out his hand to shake Hermione's. Unlike Professor Snape, Hermione gladly shook his hand. 6th year, huh? Oh, so you've just barely started then, he surmised wrongly. Hermione scrunched up her face in confusion.
I've only got 1 more year after this,
she corrected him. The doctor rocked back on his heels for a moment and ran his hand through his hair. Right. I keep forgetting how short the schools are here, he muttered. Anyway, it's a pleasure to make your acquaintance, he said, leaning forward again, flashing a charming smile. Tonks moved on to the next phase of her plan.
Hermione, I need to take care of some business. Would you be a dear and show the doctor to the headmaster's office?
She asked. She turned her head so the doctor couldn't see her mouth and whispered to Hermione,
Take the long route.
She flinched as Hermione kicked her shin. Tonks only gave her a wicked grin and patted her on the arm.
Thanks, Hermione. You're a real lifesaver. Quite literally, Doctor. She's saved her friends' lives on more than one occasion,
she bragged. Tonks grabbed Hermione's hand and put it under the doctor's arm.
See you around, Doctor,
she said and hurried off to the castle. Hermione shyly pulled her hand away. The doctor took a step back and bowed with arms wide open. Lead on, Miss Granger. I'm in your hands, he told her. Hermione turned around quickly, biting her lower lip and blushing slightly. She didn't want to entertain thoughts about him in her hands at that very moment, if she wanted the redness in her cheeks to fade.
Besides, he's much too old for me. He has to be at least 25 or 26.
She chided herself.
This way, Doctor,
she said, motioning with her hand for him to follow her. Even though she was having an internal battle over what to think of this cute guy, she decided to follow Tonks' advice and led the doctor to a different door than the one the Auror had taken. Professor Albus Dumbledore was finishing a rather interesting history text when his new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher stormed into his office. Dumbledore reverently placed the book on a pile of similar ones which sat on the corner of his enormous claw-footed desk. "Severus, to what do I owe the honor?" he asked politely. Snape shot his boss a withering glance and threw open the cabinet door where he knew the headmaster kept a bottle of vintage fire whiskey. Snape grabbed only one glass and filled it to the top with the expensive liquor. He drained the glass in one long swallow. Dumbledore decided to wait until Snape was ready to talk to find out what had disturbed his old pupil so much. Snape put the glass back in the cabinet, and it vanished to be replaced by a clean one, the dirty one appearing in a stack of dishes in the kitchen. He shut the cabinet door loudly and flung himself into one of the headmaster's overstuffed, high-backed chairs. Eventually, Snape looked up at Dumbledore. "Think long and hard before you ever ask me to pry into another person's head for the sake of the Order," he warned, exhausted from his mental ordeal with the doctor. Dumbledore looked at his friend and waited for him to continue. "As you well know, there is no one alive that is better at occlumency than I am," he boasted. "After today, I will have to move myself down to second best. The doctor not only had the most impressive mental shields that I have ever encountered, but he was able to set up a feedback trap that nearly blinded me with pain. Something I've never seen before," he said, obviously unnerved. "So, you were unable to get any readings from this man?" Dumbledore asked, concerned. Snape scoffed at Dumbledore. "What do you think I am? Some bumbling sixth-year student?" he asked haughtily. "Of course I was able to scan the man. No matter how good a person's shields are, they still take a moment to come up. A skilled legilimencer can get at least a feeling of the person he's dealing with in that brief moment," he lectured. Dumbledore smiled at Snape. "So, what type of man are we dealing with here?" he inquired. Snape paused before answering. "We're not," he said softly. "Pardon me? We're not what?" Dumbledore asked, confusion obvious in his furrowed, bushy eyebrows. Snape looked directly into Dumbledore's face, and the look gave the headmaster the chills. "We're not dealing with a man," he said softly. "When I made contact with his mind, I was able to get a brief impression. The mind I touched is in no way human," he explained slowly. Snape watched his boss's face for any kind of reaction. He wasn't expecting a look of delight to twinkle in the old man's eyes. Snape pressed on. "If that, whatever it is an Auror in Her Majesty's service, then I'll wear a Gryffindor tie for the rest of the term," he wagered. A small blue gem near the rear of Dumbledore's desk sat up on its point all by itself and started spinning rapidly. Dumbledore had placed a spell on the gem to do just that whenever someone seeking to speak with him was approaching his office. He had used it on several times to facilitate a rapid retreat down his back staircase when he didn't want to talk with a particular teacher or parent. Peering into the gem, Dumbledore saw Tonks waiting by the gargoyle next to the entrance to his office. Hermione and an oddly dressed young man were walking down the hall towards Tonks. "It would appear I am to have my audience with the doctor shortly," he pointed out. He looked back up at Snape. "That will be all, Professor Snape," he said, dismissing the Dada teacher. Once Snape got up, Dumbledore stopped him with a wave of his withered hand. "Thank you again, Severus. I honestly don't know what I would have done without you," he said sincerely. Snape looked embarrassed by the showing of gratitude and turned to leave. When Snape's hand was on the knob of the large wood door leading out of the office, Dumbledore called out, "Tell Miss Granger and Miss Tonks that I wish to speak with the doctor alone," he instructed. Snape nodded once and left the room. Tonks winked at Hermione as she and the doctor walked down the hall to Dumbledore's office. Hermione ignored the wink and stopped just short of the stone gargoyle leading up to the headmaster's office. The gargoyle leapt out of the way, startling the doctor. Snape stood in the entryway, looking cross as usual. "Headmaster Dumbledore will see you now," he told the doctor. Tonks and Hermione started to follow the doctor, but Snape put a hand on Tonks' shoulder, blocking her way. "Not you two, only him, he said, jerking his head towards the doctor. The doctor shrugged his shoulders and made his way through the entry chamber towards the spiral staircase. Once the wall sealed itself again, Snape sneered at the two young women. He turned his back on Tonks and glared at Hermione. "It's a pity. The doctor seems to have already fallen in with the wrong crowd," he snarled. Hermione was having a very difficult time keeping a straight face as Snape insulted her. As soon as he had turned to face her, Tonks had shifted her form to look like the potions teacher. While he was talking, Tonks was making a silly face, complete with crossed eyes. She bobbed her head side to side while mimicking what he was saying. Snape noticed that Hermione kept looking over his shoulder at Tonks. He spun around, only to find the pink-haired Ord chewing her gum noisily, resting against the wall. Her features looked like the ones that she normally wore.
"What?"
Tonks demanded innocently. With a huff, Snape turned back to face Hermione and then stalked down the hallway towards one of the staircases leading down. When Snape was out of earshot, Hermione let out the breath she was holding to keep herself from laughing.
Don't let Ron or Harry see you do that,
she warned.
If they do, they'll make you do it at every Christmas party at the Burrow,
she said. Tonks laughed.
"Too late. It was at the last Christmas party that Fred and George asked me to try it,"
she admitted.
"Harry was the one who suggested I cross my eyes, and Ron was the one who told me I should move my head from side to side,"
she admitted. Tonks sobered up and looked down the hall in both directions to make sure they were alone.
"So, what did you think about the handsome doctor?"
she cried, grabbing Hermione's arm. Hermione sighed loudly.
"Oh, honestly, Tonks, he's much too old for me. He's probably nearing 30 or so,"
she said. In truth, Hermione thought he was only about 25, but Tonks didn't need to know that. Tonks gave a dismissive wave of her hand.
"Oh, pooh, he's barely older than I am,"
she said.
"My dad is 12 years older than my mum, and they have a wonderful relationship. Too wonderful at times, if you ask me,"
she told her. Tonks read the expression on Hermione's face and added,
"The wall between their room and mine is sort of thin."
Hermione held up her hands to stop Tonks.
"Ew!"
she squealed. Tonks laughed again, squinting her eyes in merriment. Hermione looked at the wall where the doctor had gone through.
"Besides, it's a moot point. What would someone like that ever see in a frizzy-haired bookworm like me?"
she sighed. Tonks looked sadly at Hermione. She knew that there was way more to Hermione than the young witch was willing to believe. Deciding to change the subject, Tonks put her hand on Hermione's arm and led her to the staircase.
"I'm staying to dinner. Of course, I will have to sit at the Hufflepuff table. But I'll choose a seat behind you so you can fill me in on all of the juicy gossip,"
she said. Rolling her eyes, Hermione allowed herself to be led away. She glanced back over her shoulder once.
"He was pretty cute. For an old guy,"
she said, baiting Tonks.
"Old? What does that make me, then?"
Tonks demanded, pretending to look hurt. Hermione scrunched up her shoulders.
"Well, you do look about the same age, so—"
she said, holding out her hands. Tonks shoved her playfully.
"You'll pay for that, Miss Granger. Maybe not tonight, or the next night. But trust me, you'll pay,"
Tonks threatened. The young women laughed, sharing in one of the few opportunities to do so since the start of the magical civil war that had threatened to destroy Great Britain.